Hello team, welcome to another ATP Geopolitics video with myself, Jonathan M.S. Pearce. This is a US politics extra giving you some updates on things that have been going on for some time actually. So some of this information is sort of a week ago, over the last week really. I'm going to be talking about some really poor appointments that have been made by the Trump administration, and then concentrate a little bit on Kristi Noem, who's in charge of the Department for Homeland Security. So let's start here with the Pentagon's new press secretary, Kingsley Wilson, who appears to be a big fan of Vladimir Putin, or at least thinking the intelligence services that she is going to be reporting essentially on behalf of are worse than, more evil than Vladimir Putin. So her quote from 2022, "The American intelligence apparatus is more evil than Vladimir Putin. I'm so tired of being the good guys. Our ancestors answered violence with violence." So that's the sort of person that's now going to be the press secretary for the Pentagon. It's pretty worrying. Here we have new Kingsley Wilson, a deputy press secretary at the Department of Defense, who has come under fire for promoting anti-Semitic conspiracy theories. He's been promoted to serve as the department's press secretary. Wilson has also called Confederate General Robert E. Lee one of the greatest Americans to ever live. And of course, that is therefore to essentially condone the Confederacy and slavery, I guess. Make Kosovo Serbia again. I don't care if Russia invades Ukraine or not. America first. Zelensky's facial expression. He knows his international money laundering scheme is about to end. That is who is in charge of the press. That is who is the spokesperson for the Pentagon. This is where the American Trump administration is now. It is so deeply compromised, and it's so full of people who are woefully unfit to do the job that they're being put in place to do. It's so disappointing. I mean, let's just drop into Bill Maher, who has his finger on the pulse when it comes to the sorts of appointments that are being made at the moment, and the overwhelming number of people who are being appointed from formerly being Fox News employees.
Today, the president appointed Judge Jeanine Pirro.
Oh.
What?
She's my former colleague on Fox News. I can't say nothing.
Are you serious?
Not bullshitting.
Oh, okay, good. To be the top federal prosecutor in Washington, D.C., this makes 23 people from Fox News. The Secretary of Defense came from Fox News. The Director of National Intelligence, Secretary of Transportation, Deputy Director of the FBI, that's Diane Bongino.
Yes.
The border czar, the State Department spokesman. I mean, I've heard of state-run TV. This is TV-run state. Today.
That's a really well-constructed sort of joke line to end that, which is not a joke. It's the reality. It's not state-run TV. So it's not TV being run by the state. This is a state being run by TV, being run by Fox News. So that's the level of appointments that are going on at the moment. And, you know, Jeanine Pirro, so a person with an issue with alcohol, one might conclude. She does not exactly have the reputation, I think, that is necessary to be in that position. Anyway, she's the 23rd Fox News employee that Donald Trump has named to his administration. 23rd. Absolutely incredible. And then we hear that he's picked a conspiracy. Well, did he pick this person? Probably not. Trump picks, well, no, definitely not, because he pretty much admitted he didn't know who she was, but it's okay because Bobby, Robert Kennedy Jr. Advocates for her, so that's okay. Trump picks a conspiracy theorist with no medical license to replace Fox News contributor as Surgeon General. Now, it's really interesting listening to her speech here. I'm not going to play you the full 6 minutes 20 of this. I've listened to it. What's interesting here is this is actually someone who, on the one hand, is something of a conspiracy theorist and hasn't, fun fact, she's not a licensed physician. She cannot practice medicine. She's unqualified. And what else? She dropped out of medical residency and has an inactive medical license. She is the Surgeon General. now. But this speech she gives, so here it says, here is a President Trump's new Surgeon General, the United States nominee, says Benny Johnson, who is an anti-woke, far right, pro-Russia conspiracy theorist wingnut himself. Dr. Casey means exposing the health industry and woke medical schools for 6 minutes straight. It's safe to say she's a perfect pick. What she does in this isn't actually what he says she does. I'm not sure if he listened. She is actually quite anti. She is more on the woke side of things when it comes to almost woo, anti-science, pro, but also talking about the health of Americans with regard to drinking water and all sorts of things that there actually are genuinely really important things to be talking about. She's a whole mix of stuff, but not what Benny Johnson thinks. I'll try and pick out just a minute of this to give you an understanding. So here, as part of this speech, she talks about microplastics, which is a genuine issue, but it's not something you would hear right-wingers bang on about hauling in the plastics industry and cleaning up our waterways and the oceans and getting rid of microplastics. But this is the kind of stuff that she's talking about. Later on, she talks about obesity and needing to do more exercise, and that being a really good. So doing 7,000 steps a day is going to help you to stave off dementia and Alzheimer's, and et cetera, et cetera. So a lot of this stuff is like on point and actually kind of like, healthier schools, healthier children. You know what? It isn't like what Benny Johnson thinks, which is an attack on woke medical schools. In fact, the stuff she's saying can be construed by some wingnuts as being woke.
All by hurting our metabolic health. I did not learn that the 8 billion tons of plastic that have been produced just in the last 100 years, plastic was only invented about 100 years ago, are being broken down into microplastics that are now filling our food, our water, and we are now even inhaling them in our air. And that very recent research from just the past couple of months tells us that now about 0.5% of our brains by weight are now plastic. I didn't learn that there are more than 80,000.
So that's the kind of thing she's talking about. And she kind of ends, I'll leave you with how she ends this and see whether this is, attack on woke medical schools and whatnot. As if, is she particularly, say, anti-woke? I don't know. I don't think she is. I think she's more likely to fall into that kind of woo category.
Over life, we are choosing darkness over light.
So this is it. So here it comes.
We are choosing death over light. We are choosing death over life. We are choosing darkness over light for people and the planet, which are inextricably linked. We are choosing to erroneously believe that we are separate from nature and that we can continue to poison nature and then outsmart it. Our path out will be a renewed respect for the miracle of life and a renewed respect for nature. We can restore health to Americans rapidly with smart policy and courageous leadership. We need a return to courage. We need a return to common sense and intuition. We need a return to awe for the sheer miraculousness of our lives. We need all hands on deck. Thank you.
Right. So what's quite interesting here is this is a typical Bobby Kennedy Jr. kind of approach. So he is a bit woo, anti-vaccine, kind of on the far left side of things and rejecting some mainstream science. That seems what she's like. And she's saying we are inextricably linked to nature. I'd argue that's absolutely on point. But this isn't something that people like Benny Johnson, I don't think Benny Johnson's listened to her here, to say 6 minutes straight of attacks on woke medical schools. It's like, oh no, but I mean, is she qualified to be a Surgeon General? I don't know. And I don't think Donald Trump knows either.
You just announced a new nominee for the U.S. Surgeon General who never finished her residency and is not a practicing physician. So can you explain why you picked her to be America's top doctor?
Because Bobby thought she was fantastic. She's she's a brilliant woman who went through Stanford, and as I understand it, she basically wanted to be an academic as opposed to a surgeon. I think she graduated first in her class at Stanford, and Bobby really thought she was great. I don't know her. I listened to the recommendation of Bobby. I met her yesterday and once before. She's a very outstanding person, a great academic, actually. So I think she'll be great.
Yeah, Bobby said she's great, so she's great, type thing. And I guess, the president's not going to know all the nominees for all of these positions personally, right? And so it's always going to be a case of taking these nominations on account of what people around you are telling you. This is very much, I think, and as I said, a RFK Jr. a nomination, but there is still the element of people who are somewhat unfit for the job, like a non-practicing physician who dropped out of medical school being Surgeon General. I don't know. It just strikes me as typically Trumpian, right? Okay. But it gets even more interesting when you hear what Nicole Shanahan. So Nicole Shanahan was a running mate of RFK Jr. when he was running for president against Trump and against Biden, and then eventually against Kamala Harris. Now, she says, yes, it's very strange, doesn't make any sense. I was promised that if I supported RFK Jr. in his Senate confirmation, that neither of these siblings, and we'll learn, there are siblings here, would be working under HHS, so Human Health Services, or in an appointment, and that people much more qualified would be. I don't know if RFK has very clearly lied to me or what is going on. It has been clear in recent conversations that he is reporting to someone regularly who is controlling his decisions, and it isn't President Trump. That's fascinating, right? With regards to the siblings, there is something very artificial and aggressive about them, almost like they were bred and raised Manchurian assets. Wow. So the Independent reports on this. RFK Jr. either clearly lied to me about Surgeon General nominee or someone is controlling him, ex-running mate claims. But just to give you some more context to this. Okay, Nicole Shanahan is so alarmed by the sudden nomination of Casey Means, who you just heard, for US Surgeon General that she's now claiming Health and Human Services Secretary Robert Kennedy Jr. either clearly lied to her or someone is controlling his decisions at HHS. A day before, former Fox News pundit Dr. Jeanine Pirro, so another one of the 23, was scheduled to appear at a Senate confirmation hearing. President Donald Trump pulled her as his nominee. So actually a Fox News person was pulled to be the nation's top doctor. The withdrawal comes amid concerns that she can embellish her credentials, as well as growing anger among Trump loyalists over her support for vaccinations. She had someone going to be Surgeon General who was actually pro-vaccination, the scientifically accepted way to combat diseases and pandemics. Anywho, Casey Means, the woman you just heard, and a replacement to that one who was taken out of the running, whom the president said has impeccable Maher credentials, Make America Healthy Again credentials, has been a close ally of Kennedy's and rose to prominence in recent years as a wellness influencer. So, a wellness influencer that Benny Johnson is saying is attacking woke medical schools. This sounds rather woke to me. Hey, Benny. A wellness influencer and a practitioner of so-called functional medicine, along with her brother Callie, so they're their siblings, a former food industry lobbyist who now serves as a White House health advisor. Means appears on former Fox News star Tucker Carlson's show last year, which ended up being the most watched podcast episode of 2024. And while she was echoed much of Kennedy's skepticism about vaccines and how unhealthy food is the cause of many of America's health issues, Means' nomination has also come under scrutiny from Trump supporters over her lack of medical qualifications. She currently doesn't have an active medical license, having never completed her training as an otolaryngologist and head and neck and head and neck surgeon after graduating from Stanford University's medical school. Shanahan, who was Kennedy's running mate during the HHS chief's aborted independent presidential campaign, reacted to the growing criticism over the means pit by claiming that Kennedy vowed the good energy author wouldn't have a role in the administration. And then, as we heard from her tweet, she was not happy. She took an additional shot at Casey and Caddy Means, claiming that, quote, there is something very artificial and aggressive about them, almost like they've been bred and raised Manchurian assets. MAGA extremist Laura Loomer, whose criticism of Nishuat, so the person who was previously got rid of because she seemed to be too pro-vaccinations, the dangerous COVID vaccine may have played a role in the withdrawn nomination, also has sounded off on the Means pick. Quote, how is a top doctor in the US supposed to give medical guidance and advice to the nation when she doesn't even have an active medical license in the state where she allegedly practiced medicine? Loomer griped on Twitter. Does Casey Means even have an active medical license in any state? This is so embarrassing for the Trump administration. She added in another post, it's worth noting that Casey Means doesn't have a surgical residency and isn't a surgeon. The term Surgeon General is interesting given the fact that there is no requirement to be a surgeon to be Surgeon General. Turns out you can just be a social media influencer and become Surgeon General. Wow. I mean, absolutely incredible. So, you've got a wellness influencer who's not a surgeon becoming Surgeon General. Jack Posobiec, who is a real problematic right-wing influencer, saying, what if instead of a vaccine we just were able to get exposed to a weak version of the virus that enabled us to build the antibodies we need to fight the real thing? So just on vaccines, I just thought I'd throw this one in there. It just shows you the complete lack of ignorance from these people. So here's evidently an anti-vaxxer suggesting that instead of using vaccines, we develop something that, what's that? Oh, it's a vaccine. That's it. What if instead of a vaccine, we just were able to get exposed to a weak version of the virus that enabled us to build the antibodies we need to fight the real thing? That's literally what a vaccine is. The anti-vaxxers went so far right, they looped round and invented vaccinations. Just nuts. Anyway, I thought I'd throw that one in there. Right. Now, Kash Patel, another one of these just insanely bad appointments. There is concern that Kash Patel is not taking his FBI director role seriously. His intelligence briefing went from 5 days a week to 2 days a week because he wasn't showing up on time. When he does attend, his briefers find it hard to hold his attention. He's been traveling around the country on FBI jets, spotted at hockey games and UFC fights with celebrities, but he's not doing his job. I mean, who knew? Who knew that these people are woefully unqualified to do the job that they are supposed to be doing? Kash Patel is another one of these appointed to a really important position, basically on account of him saying stuff that Trump really liked in terms of retribution for Trump's enemies. But he, just like Trump, is not taking intelligence briefings. Just incredible. Like, Trump's supposedly taken something like 12 intelligence briefings since January the 20th, which equates to something like one in every 10 days he takes an intelligence briefing. That's a president of the United States with all the wars going on and all the craziness happening around the world. And the FBI director has moved from 5 days a week taking intelligence briefings to 2 days a week because he doesn't turn up to them and doesn't take his role seriously, doesn't show up on time, and prefers going and hanging out with celebrities. And then you've got the appointment of Scott Duffy to transportation, but along with Doge getting rid of all of these FAA employees, and then wondering why America's airports are having issues. So this is Donald Trump saying air traffic problems caused by the incompetent Biden administration, as headed by, in this case, a total novice and political hack, Pete Buttigieg. I will fix it. He says, like, gutting the FAA and leading to complete chaos. as this source says, you effing moron. You fired 400 FAA employees. Those weren't desk jockeys. They were aviation safety assistants, flight operations specialists, radar technicians, and maintenance crews keeping the systems running. Now you want to blame Biden because FAA operations are struggling? And let's not forget, Republicans voted against the 2019 bill that would have funded critical upgrades to air traffic control. Sit this one out. I mean, it's an insult. It's an insult to, well, certainly to my sensibilities. It's an insult to, rational, evidence-based policy making and just sensible policy when you have idiots like Donald Trump making statements like this, mischaracterizing reality, and just taking the easy cop-out option of blaming everyone but yourself, blaming the Biden administration for the issues with FAA when the Republicans voted against improving the FAA and then gutted the FAA. It's just insane. And then you've got Tulsi Gabbard as the Director of National Intelligence, in charge of, say, is it 18 different intelligence departments reporting to her. Eric Brewer says, I worked at the National Intelligence Council, I think that is. This is a big deal. We'll talk about what she says in a second, what has happened in a second. The result will be an intelligence community less willing to tell the president and other leaders what they need to know rather than what they want to hear. America will be less secure because of it. What's happened? Well, Tulsi Gabbard, as I told you previously, fired leaders of an intelligence group who wrote a report that was evidence-based, but it was just not ideologically what she wanted to hear. So if you remember, she and the Trump administration want the Venezuelan government to be linked to the Tren de Aragua gang, so that they can claim that the Venezuelan government has ordered that gang to infiltrate the United States, so that they can claim that they are being invaded, so that they can bring about the Alien Enemies Act of 1798 in order to round these people up and send them off to El Salvador and whatnot. And so it's all linked. So she then got her intelligence peeps to do a report on Venezuela and how they are linked to the gang, and they're ordering the gang to do X, Y, and Z. And the report came out to say there's no evidence of this, load of nonsense, essentially. I mean, not in those terms. And then instead of changing your approach to policy because evidence has come out to suggest you were wrong, you fire the people that tell you what you don't want to hear. And then this brings about a culture of obsequiousness and yes men, where no one speaks truth to power, and your intelligence services are telling you what you want to hear rather than what you need to hear. Eric Brewer continues, the professionals in the intelligence community can withstand a lot and will no doubt do their utmost to continue to provide objective assessments, but this act is blatant politicization and will have a chilling effect. Really, really problematic, I'd have to say. Here again, Shashank Joshi talking about Tulsi Gabbard. What happens when honest intelligence work can get you fired? Take a moment to imagine what might have happened if Gabbard was DNI in late 2021. How would she have dealt with the analysts who predicted a Russian invasion of Ukraine? What incentives would this have set for collection and assessment? It's just absolutely incredible. But these are the sorts of appointments that are being made by the Trump administration. And then you've got Senator Mark Kelly, who was running for the vice president under Kamala Harris's attempt to become president. He lost out eventually to Tim Walz with some others. Anyway, this is what he says on the Defense Secretary's national security priorities and firings.
Is this a normal budget process that we're facing here?
Not a normal administration, not a normal Secretary of Defense. I was talking to a couple of my Republican colleagues about this a few weeks ago, and one of the lines was, well, they wanted unconventional, and this is what we get.
Well,
like a lot of people fired, people who have served their country, all of their adult life, who were doing, by any account, great jobs.
And he's talking more about what happened in the Pentagon, in the Department of Defense, where loads of people have been purged who are very well respected and knowledgeable members of the Department of Defense, 4-star generals and admirals and lower down. And then you've had National Security Council firings, and you've had people under Tulsi Gabbard being fired, and it's just an absolute travesty.
General Brown, Admiral Franchetti, and others, but also firing his own staff, and the amount of chaos that creates in any organization. So of course they don't seem to be focused on the right things. I think Congressman Smith pointed out, what is this SecDef's office focused on? It doesn't seem to me to be the major priorities we have in our national security, the rise of China, Russia, Ukraine. It's more about books and bathrooms and, stuff that doesn't really matter to our warfighting capability.
Focus on the culture wars. That's what you're going to get if you are going to employ a Fox News weekend anchor to be in charge of 3 million people and America's fighting machine, war machine. Just, yeah. You're going to worry about transgender bathrooms and books. Get rid of all the books in the library rather than, have a well-oiled machine that is able to rise to the threats of this global political turmoil. Now, here is, just incredible. It is another issue of appointment. The level, and when I say the level, I don't mean high level. The incredibly low level of quality of people who are being put forward for these jobs is incredible. It's just insane.
And it's about social.
So sorry, what's the preface to this? It's the audio of the Social Security chief, right, or the guy who is being put forward for Social Security chief by the Trump administration, talking about what happened after he was offered the job.
And it's about Social Security, and I'm really not. I swear I'm not looking for a job. And I'm like, well, what am I going to do? So I'm Googling Social Security, one of my great skills. I'm one of the great Googlers on the East Coast. But that is the headline for the Post. Great Googler in chief. Chief and Googler, whatever. By the way, I like to have fun at work. We're allowed to laugh. We're allowed to have fun. We're allowed to know each other's families. We're allowed to be normal. How's that? I'm like, what the heck's the commissioner of Social Security? First, nobody said we're calling you if it was about Social Security, so I'm trying to figure it out.
Okay, so it's hard to hear what some of that was, but essentially I'm like, what the hell am I going to do? So I'm Googling Social Security, one of my great skills. I'm one of the great Googlers of the East Coast, and then he banged on about that. I'm like, what the heck's the commissioner of Social Security? Anyway, he's got the job in charge of Social Security, so that's good, isn't it? Goodness me. Right, and then we're going to go on to Kristi Noem, and I'm going to play you this. This is from Senator Chris Murphy. I've got a lot of time for Chris Murphy. I would put him as an outside bet for running for president maybe in the next elections. I think he's got the chops to do it. I think he's good. As Truth Matters here says, this is probably one of the best speeches in committee I've ever heard. We often hear passionate, emotional speeches, and I applaud that, but this is a forensic dismantling of a woman, and that is Kristi Noem, who's head of the Department of Homeland Security, who arrogantly thinks she and the administration she belongs to are above the law. They are not. Kristi Noem attended the hearing intent on being obstructive and dismissive, and Chris Murphy gave her a masterclass in the constitutional responsibilities of government. I salute you, sir. So now we're going to spend a little bit of time. Sorry if you're not interested in this, but you don't have to watch. This is Kristi Noem in an incredibly important position, being shown up for her lack of pedigree, her lack of ability to hold the Constitution and law in high regard. And this is good stuff.
I say this with seriousness and respect, but your department is out of control. You are spending like you don't have a budget. You're on the verge of running out of money for the fiscal year. You are illegally refusing to spend funds that have been authorized by this Congress and appropriated by this committee. You are ignoring the immigration laws of this nation, implementing a brand new immigration system that you have invented that has little relation to the statutes that you are required, that you are commanded to follow, as spelled out in your oath of office. You are routinely violating the rights of immigrants who may not be citizens, but whether you like it or not, they have constitutional and statutory rights when they reside in the United States. Your agency acts as if laws don't matter, as if the election gave you some mandate to violate the Constitution and the laws passed by this Congress. It did not give you that mandate. You act as if your disagreement with the law, or even the public's disagreement with the law, is relevant and gives you the ability to create your own law. It does not give you that ability. Let's start with your spending. You are on track to trigger the Anti-Deficiency Act. That means you are going to spend more money than you have been allocated by Congress. This is a rare occurrence, and it is wildly illegal. Your agency will be broke by July, over 2 months before the end of the fiscal year. You may not think that Congress has provided enough money to ICE, but the Constitution and the federal law does not allow you to spend more money than you have been given or to invent money. And this obsession with spending at the border, as the chairwoman mentioned, has left the country unprotected elsewhere. The security threats to the United States are higher, not lower, than when before Trump came to office. To fund the border, you have illegally gutted spending for cybersecurity. As we speak, Russian and Chinese hackers are having a field day attacking our nation. You've withdrawn funds for disaster prevention. Storms are going to kill more people in this country because of your illegal withholding of these funds. Your myopia about the border, fueled by President Trump's prejudice against people who speak a different language, has shattered many of this country's most important defenses. Now let's talk about the impoundments. When Congress appropriates funds for a specific purpose, the administration has no discretion as to whether to spend or not spend that money unless you go through a very specific process with this committee. Let me give you two of many instances of this illegal impoundment. The first is the Shelter and Services Program. Senator Britt may want to zero that account out, but that account is funded, and it was funded in a bipartisan way. You don't like the program. Your policy is to treat migrants badly. I think that's abhorrent, but it doesn't matter that you don't like the program. You cannot cancel spending in this program, and you cannot use the funds as you have to fund other things like ICE. You have also canceled citizenship and integration grants, which help lawful permanent residents become citizens, helping them take the citizenship test. I know your goal is to try to make life as hard as possible for immigrants, but that goal is not broadly shared by the American public. That's why Congress, in a bipartisan way, for decades, has funded this program to help immigrants in this country become citizens. Now let's talk about why encounters at the southern border are down so much. This is clearly going to be your primary talking point today. You will tell us that it represents a success. But the primary reason why encounters are down is because you are brazenly violating the law every hour of every day. You are refusing to allow people showing up at the southern border to apply for asylum. I acknowledge that you don't believe that people should be able to apply for asylum, but you don't get to choose that. The White House doesn't get to choose that. The law requires you to process people who are showing up at the border and who claim asylum. Why? Because our asylum law is a bipartisan commitment, an effort to correct for our nation's unconscionable decision to deny entry to Jews to this country who are being hunted and killed by the Nazis.
So what's really important to note here is that this is about legality. So put aside what your views on immigration are, and even if you're really strongly anti-immigrant, you should surely be an advocate of the American government following the laws and the stipulations of Congress, rather than acting as a dictatorship. As soon as you start saying, oh, it's okay that they do that because I don't like immigrants, then you're allowing them to do anything. And eventually some of those things that they will do will be things that you don't like. And your family are going to be taken off the streets because of some other thing that they're unilaterally deciding they can do, irrespective of the laws of the country and the processes of Congress. So it's a very dangerous path to go down, to say, I'm so anti-immigration, I don't mind if they break the law here. That is cherry picking the law when it suits you and then kicking off when it doesn't. No, you either have law or you don't. You either have the the legal processes involved in making those laws in place, or you don't. It's either free for all, or you adhere to the structures of Congress and the judiciary in the United States.
Our nation, Republicans and Democrats, decided, wrote it into law, that we would not repeat that horror ever again, and thus we would allow for people who were fleeing terror and torture to come here, arrive at the border, and make a case for asylum. Finally, let's talk about these disappearances. In an autocratic society, people who the regime does not like are people who are protesting the regime. They are just often picked up off the street, spirited away, sometimes to open-ended detention. Sometimes they're never seen again. What you are doing, both the individuals who have legal rights to stay here, like Kilmar Abrego Garcia, or students who are just protesting Trump's policies, is immoral. And to follow the theme, it is illegal. You have no right to deport a student visa holder with no due process simply because they have spoken in a way that offends the president. You can't remove migrants who a court has given humanitarian protection from removal. Now, reports suggest that you are planning to remove immigrants with no due process and send them to prisons in Libya. Libya is in the middle of a civil war. It is subject to a level 4 travel advisory, meaning we tell American citizens never to travel to Libya. We don't have an embassy there because it is not safe for our diplomats. Sending migrants with pending asylum claims into a war zone just because it's cruel is so deeply disturbing. Listen, I understand that my Republican colleagues on this committee don't view the policy the way that I do. My Republican colleagues don't share my level of concern for the way that this administration treats immigrants. That's fine. But what I don't understand is why we don't have consensus in the Senate and on this committee on the decision by this administration to impound the spending that we have decided together to allocate in defense of this nation. We as an appropriations committee, we work interminable hours to write and pass a budget. This budget is really hard to write and pass. And so we make ourselves irrelevant when we allow the administration to ignore what we have decided. And then when we look the other way, when the administration rounds up immigrants who are here illegally and have committed no offenses worthy of detainment, we also do potential irreversible damage to the Constitution. These should not be partisan concerns, destroying the power of Congress, eroding individuals' constitutional rights. This should matter to both parties.
And I just think that's a really good speech there from Chris Murphy, who's coming up with the receipts there, laying out very clearly where Kristi Noem is going wrong. And then we have another, I think, good moment here from Dan Goldman on Kristi Noem as well.
He was surrounded by gang members of MS-13.
Will you give Mr. Abrego Garcia the due process that the Supreme Court and Judge Wilkinson has required you to give him?
Abrego Garcia is an El Salvador resident who is in his home country. If he were to come back to this country, he would be immediately removed again.
How do you know?
He has received and been treated appropriately, and he is not.
How can you say he's been treated appropriately if the Supreme Court has ruled 9-0? 9-0 that he hasn't been treated appropriately. Why is your opinion better and have more authority than the Supreme Court?
Investigators, 2 judges, an immigration court that all said he was MS-13 and was removed from this country.
But you understand, that is you saying that. That is you saying that.
That is them saying that. This
no.
Investigators and law
that is
you
making that determination.
Against him. If you don't trust
the court has considered all that. The judge has considered all that, Madam Secretary. And if you would be quiet, because I'm reclaiming my time, you are not following this court order. But let's focus on the court order, because this opinion also says that to facilitate, which the Supreme Court is requiring, is an active verb. It requires that steps be taken. What steps have you taken to return Mr. Abrego Garcia to allow him to get due process?
Abrego Garcia is in his home country.
What steps have you taken?
If your continued advocacy for him were to...
I'm not advocating for him. I'm advocating for a court order, Madam Secretary, the court order says that you must take steps to follow the court order. You are here under oath. What steps have you taken to return Mr. Abrego Garcia pursuant to this court order?
It's got to be extremely discouraging to be one of your constituents. To see you fight for a terrorist like this and not fight for them is extremely alarming to me.
I'm fighting for due process, and that's under the Constitution.
Gentleman's time has expired.
Due process.
The gentleman.
I find it so frustrating that he can ask for clear answers from her and she will obfuscate and not give those answers. And he's absolutely right. She's saying, I can't believe you're supporting this terrorist. It's like, well, we don't know he's a terrorist, but you've got clear requirements from the highest court in the land, 9-0, ordering that there should be a facilitation of him being brought back to the US. What have you done to support that is pursuant to that ruling? And she doesn't answer the question. In other words, the Department of Homeland Security is above the law, and Chrissy Gnome is the person who is doing that. And then, here's another one where she gets absolutely annihilated. This is one of the most awe-inspiring, righteous, patriotic American takedowns I've ever seen. Watch how every Democrat needs to talk from now on. Puppy killer Chrissy Noem gets annihilated. That's in reference to her shooting her dog, as she wrote in her book.
Well, let me ask you the follow-up question here, because I have a lot of them. Do you agree that Article 1 of the Constitution gives Congress the power of the purse? Yes or no?
Yes, that is a duty.
Do you
of
believe
Congress
that, let me ask you another follow-up, it's just yes or no. Do you believe you have the power to disregard congressional appropriations and unilaterally repurpose funds that have been duly appropriated by Congress? Yes or no?
Ma'am, we are not doing that.
So the answer to you is no. All right, well, it was a yes.
And again, frustrating. You answer yes or no. Not, we're not doing that. She says, is it appropriate that it was a counterfactual? Do you think this situation is an acceptable situation? Yes or no? We're not doing that. No, yes or no? And this is relevant. I mean, this is exactly kind of what Chris Murphy was talking about, which is the appropriation of funding by Kristi Noem that has been, appropriated by Congress to be used in this particular way, and Kristi Noem is using it in a way that has not. The permission's not been given for her to do that. So it's essentially an illegal use of the funding that's been appropriated by Congress.
Yes or no, Secretary? Let me continue. Interestingly, you said no. But since you've been Secretary, you have repeatedly disregarded the law. You have illegally impounded funds that Congress appropriated and that your branch of government must implement pursuant to the law. Yet you've closed offices established in law, including the Office for Civil Rights and Civil Liberties, the Office of the Immigration Detention Ombudsman, the Office of the Citizenship and Immigration Services, and you've canceled contracts for programs authorized in law, including shelter and service programs and citizenship and integration grants. You've obstructed and roughed up members of this committee as they attempted to conduct congressional oversight, and then you vilified them. But my question is, if they were so bad, why were they allowed to go in after to conduct oversight? Let me just continue. You redirected funds to terrorize our communities. You created taxpayer-funded political propaganda campaigns to terrorize families and children who don't sleep at night because of the terror of those commercials that you are putting out there. You hold sick, disrespectful press conferences in my state where, let me be clear, you are not welcome. You corruptly used emergency authority to avoid procurement to make Trump's private prison donors richer by directing $45 billion for them to expand ICE detention centers. You defunded work to address real threats to the homeland, all while you pursued college newspaper editors, labor leaders, and even a Harvard scientist who failed to declare frog embryos at the airport. Clearly, we don't have time for all my questions, so I have 13 pages worth of questions that I will be submitting to the record that I expect you and the administration to answer. But here is my final question to you. When you took your oath, did you swear to support and defend the Constitution of the United States of America? Yes or no?
Yes, I did.
So I find it laughable. You don't behave like someone who takes that oath seriously. And let me tell you why. We don't live in a dictatorship or a monarchy. Trump's will is not the guiding doctrine of this nation, and our country is not a playground for his or your twisted authoritarian fantasies. We are a democracy. We defend the Constitution and we affirm the rule of law. We respect the co-equal branches of government and we uphold our rights, even when we disagree. The foundation of our nation is based on a core set of constitutional rights upon which our prosperity, our pluralism, and our peace depend on it. You, however, have been leading this work for 116 days, and in that time, you have profiled and dehumanized our neighbors. You've betrayed our constitutional commitment to due process. You've deported United States citizens. You've undermined the courts. You've broken the law. You've engaged in corruption, and you've weaponized the immigration system to violate civil rights. As Senator Murphy perfectly stated, your department is out of control, but you're responsible. You have betrayed the sacred fundamentals of your oath. And I believe to my core that you are not fit to hold the office. And I again, to your face, demand your immediate resignation. And I put it and place it on the record for all of us to see. With that, Chairman, I yield back.
Generally yields.
Absolutely outstanding. Like all of these excoriations of Kristi Noem are absolutely on point. Very, very forceful. So just moving on from Kristi Noem, this is Marjorie Taylor Greene, and this appeared on Jimmy Kimmel's show. This is so delightful. So humiliated on live TV in a desperate smear, Marjorie Taylor Greene cropped a photo to make it look like a committee witness flipped her off, but he really held up two fingers. Representative Melanie Stansbury brought receipts, and it was epic. So this is basically Marjorie Taylor Greene cropped a picture of him doing this to make it look like he was flipping the bird.
She used a clearly doctored photo that makes it seem like this guy who's in charge of U.S. fencing was giving the middle finger when, in fact, he was holding up two fingers.
Here displayed behind me is the post that Mr. Lefelt put up. Mr. Lefelt came in here today saying that this is game day.
One moment, a point of order, please,
You're
Madam Chair.
not.
Madam
Okay,
Chair, I have a point of order. The document that you have up behind you is a misrepresentation of the actual post. It appears that you're trying to misrepresent a witness here who you use subpoena powers against.
This is not Ms. Stansbury. Ms. Stansbury, this is not a point of order.
The actual picture.
Ms. Stansbury, you're not recognized. Ms. Stansbury, you're not recognized. Ms. Stansbury, you are not recognized.
She used a clearly doctored...
It shows how insanely disingenuous. I mean, that is, as far as I'm concerned, that is slander and total defamation, really. But that's what Marjorie Taylor Greene is willing to do, and she's chairing that group there. And I just love Stansbury just in real time saying, I've got receipts. Anyway, that's just a little sidebar before we see just a shorter one concerning Kristi Noem again. Let's just see another one from Senator Kim.
I wanted
this
to just
time.
go back to something that was raised earlier about habeas corpus. Can you confirm to us that you understand that any suspension of habeas corpus requires an act of Congress?
Habeas corpus is effectively due process. You can't just take people off the streets, and then it has to be due process.
President Lincoln executed habeas corpus in the past with retroactive action by Congress. I believe that any president that was able to do that in the past, it should be afforded to our current day president. This president has never said he's going to do this. He's never communicated to me or his administration that they're going to consider suspending habeas corpus, but I do think the Constitution allows them the right to consider it.
when we saw what happened with, how many times has habeas corpus been suspended in our country?
Once that I know of.
4 times.
For certain. I'm not certain if those were...
The instance that you were referring to was one where the courts subsequently showed that Congress is the one that has the ability. Do you know what section of the Constitution the suspension clause of habeas corpus is in?
I do not. Nope.
Do you know which article it is in?
No, I do not, sir.
Okay, well, it is in Article 1. Do you know which branch of government Article 1 outlines the tasks and the responsibilities for?
Yes.
Which one?
Congress.
Yes.
In other words, Congress does that. You don't get to do that unilaterally. You don't get to get rid of due process and then start rounding people up because you say so. Again, it goes back to congressional, not just oversight, but processes involving Congress. And I'm going to leave you with this one again, even shorter. This is Senator Hassan with Kristi Noem again.
Secretary Noem, what is habeas corpus?
Well, habeas corpus is a constitutional right that the president has to be able to remove people from this country and suspend their right to...
And that's not even what habeas corpus is. Like, it's not the right to remove people.
Let me stop you, ma'am. Habeas corpus, excuse me, that's incorrect.
President Lincoln used it.
Excuse me. Habeas corpus is the legal principle that requires that the government provide a public reason for detaining and imprisoning people. If not for that protection, the government could simply arrest people, including American citizens, and hold them indefinitely for no reason. Habeas corpus is the foundational right that separates free societies like America from police states like North Korea. Secretary.
Boom. And there you go. And yet Kristi Noem thinks the president should have the right to rescind habeas corpus and just take anyone off the streets because, hey, that's what democracies do, right? And so, although I've concentrated largely on Kristi Noem, I mean, it's just on the back end of all sorts of appointments that are just woefully inadequate. These people are unqualified to do the jobs they've been set out to do, whether it be Pete Hegseth, whether it be Kristi Noem, whether it be the Surgeon General or the press secretary, even Caroline Leavitt, and the things she's doing. It's just, we are seeing the dismantling of the democratic norms and the constitutional norms in the United States. And we are seeing the development of an authoritarian police state where these departments and these roles are being filled with people who are not experts in the areas, but loyal to the dear leader. It's a really dangerous place for the United States to be.